Yeah.
Never mind. I was gonna remind you to record.
Oh, thank you. All right. All right. So let's go to this. We're going to learn a new term tonight. It is Musar or Musar. Musar has a lot of different meanings. Um, it can mean discipline. It can mean moral conduct. It can very often it's instruction. It's one of these terms that's very elastic, depending on the how it's used. Um, but I just want to get Joey. I'm going to mute you here. Okay, there we go. Um, so it's often one of its many uses is that it's the study for ethical behavior. So you might hear people say, "I'm studying Musar or Musar," uh, because it's become over time an approach to study. Um, there's Musar literature. This particular type of literature has a long history in Judaism. It goes back. I mean, even the book of Proverbs can be considered Musar literature because it is a book that it makes suggestions of how one should guidelines for how one should live one's life, especially ethically. Many of the some of the rabbinic texts are can be included in this category. Um, and but in the 19th century, I don't know if it was a response to Hasidism, but it was definitely a concern in Jewish education in the yeshivot, which had become very prominent in Europe, where young men would go and study full time for a number of years, and the there were all different, just like today, there's the different educational approaches, but there was a concern, at least among uh, what's his name, Salanter, Israel Salanter, who was one of the leading educators in the yeshiva world, that the type of education that the students were getting, which was very much focused on legal material, the Talmud and the legal texts, were not developing people, giving them a good what should I say, kind of a good psychological, ethical, spiritual um, approach that should that and he was concerned about that. So he developed this approach to learning, to study, in which ethical teachings was an essential component of the learning process. And so from that, there's developed a number of of spiritual texts, ethical texts that people study. One of the things I'm going to start doing, and you may have seen it today, we're in the month of Elul right now, which is the preparatory month before the high holidays. And so it's a time when people start to prepare for these days, in which we're going to be thinking about doing tshuva, repentance, changing our ways, changing from past, going forward into the future. And so I'm going to start sending out daily teachings just to get us thinking about these things. One of the texts that I'm going to be using is called Sefer Ma'alot Amidot, in which the author, this is a 13th century text, the author has 24 lessons on different virtues that people should strive for. The one that I sent out today, I'm sending a couple, is a mystical text from the 16th century, or the lesson is based on a mystical text known as Tomer Devora, which was written by one of the great Kabbalists of the 16th century. The book itself is very short, very small, but it has a number of lessons. The goal is that how can a person emulate the divine? How can we be like God? Um, and So the question is, so he describes that in his work. What we can, how does God behave, and what we can learn from that. So I have a few lessons from that. So Musar literature is very ancient, but in the 19th century, it became an actual movement. Okay, let me stop that. One Now, one of the earliest texts, which is considered to be a Musar text, again before the 19th century movement, is called Chovot HaLevavot, Duties of the Heart. And the author was Bachya ibn Pekuda. And Bachya ibn Pekuda emphasized what would become the essential goal of Musar, which is how can we find inner meaning and direction in the mitzvot. He he wrote in the introduction of the work that uh, all of the books that he studied, he was living in Spain in the 11th century. All the books that he had studied about how a Jew should live one's life, they're all focused on external behaviors. You know, what you should eat and how you should dress and how often you pray and all these external behaviors. And he said, I couldn't find anything about what are about the internal mitzvot, how we should think and feel. So that's what the essence of the book is. And the goal really there was how we can make the commandments of God something more meaningful than ritual behavioralism. So the key mitzvah in all of this is what the great Rabbi Akiva uh, first, no, first, oh my God, okay, first, second century person, scholar, who said that the greatest, the most significant mitzvah is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your fellow, love your neighbor as yourself. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this. What does it mean? Now, I don't think it's in today's lesson that I sent out, but one of the lessons from Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the 16th century Kabbalist, was, and it relates back to some of the lessons we had on God with monism or panentheism that Art Green, who's a modern contemporary theologian, writes about, which is that, everybody, God is in everything, or the whole world is God. And so therefore we're all a part. And so when we say love your neighbor as yourself, he describes how, since there's divine in each of us, to love your neighbor as yourself makes complete sense, because when you love somebody else, you're simply loving yourself. We're all part of this we're all connected to one another. So your neighbor is yourself. So that's one way to look at it. Other is to love the other, that it's important to love the other, to express love, and that it's Emmanuel Levinas is another, well, he's not alive anymore, but 20th century theologian, who talks about how all ethics begins with the other. That's where love. That's when we know how to have a sense of love, because there are other people, and we look in the face of the other. That's where all ethical concerns begin. So there's a lot of different ways to discuss it, but one of the things that Judaism has done is to translate this notion of love, which is it's an emotion, a feeling, into concrete behaviors. So loving humanity is not a concrete thing. It's I don't know if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, but at one point somebody says to what's his name, the main character, he said, who's a curmudgeon. He goes, you hate people. He goes, no, I love humanity, I don't like people. I don't like individuals. So Judaism is the opposite. So loving humanity doesn't really, how do you love humanity? There's all types of human beings, and it's an abstract concept. But to love an actual human being, that's concrete behavior. Now, it's not so easy. It's easier to love in the abstract than a real person with all their flaws and distinctive traits. But loving your neighbor as yourself is understood as concrete actions and behaviors that lead to that lead to love. So to love, for example, is to comfort a mourner. to help financially with another person, to praise somebody, to share words of praise. That's an act of love. If emoting love does not come easily to one's personality, you can still express it through concrete acts. You know, some people, my dad, I don't think my dad ever said, I love you in all the years I knew him, but I never doubted my father's love. He just didn't talk that way. But, you know, in terms of how he treated my brother and I, there was no question of the love that my father had for us. So how you behave. So sometimes it's a little bit, you know, depending on person's personality. Um, Maybe it's not expressing love or emoting love isn't so easy, but you can do it through concrete acts. So the command to love the stranger, which appears frequently in the Torah, I believe it appears more times than any other commandment to love the stranger, is given a motivation. It's connected to a historical experience because were strangers in Egypt. They know the experience of being a stranger and how hard that is. Therefore, you have to turn that experience around into something positive to love the other, to love the stranger. So, therefore, love in this sense is not about emotions. It's also about how you wish to be treated. That's, you know, Hillel's famous dictum. We mentioned that last week, which is not in the positive, it's in the negative. Don't do to others what you don't want to be done to you. And treating people with that respect is, again, an act of love. So to love one as yourself also therefore means you have to care for yourself, because if you don't love yourself, how can you ever fulfill that mitzvah? You have to love yourself as well. Um, and there's a verse in the Torah, Shmartem nafshechem. You have to guard your soul, guard yourself, and that's seen as another example of love, loving yourself, and part of this, love your neighbor as yourself. That you can't forsake your own needs. One of the things we've been doing, or I mentioned the lessons I'm going to be sending out. We've been doing some of it in the morning at the morning minyan, and I think the next one we're doing is nidivut, which is the virtue of generosity. And one of the things that the author of the book says regarding generosity is, and he's very big on generosity. You should be generous with your money. You should be generous with your time. You should be generous with your whole person, energy, you know, that you give to other people. But he does warn, it's a letter written to his children. He does say that even when it comes to money, you've got to be careful not to give it all away, because you still have to take care of yourself. The worst thing you could do in trying to be generous is to be so generous that you become needy and person who's impoverished and needs the help of others. So he warns them that, again, even when it comes to generosity, you have to be generous to yourself. You have to take care of yourself. So these are all aspects of loving others. Also, the whole notion of love your neighbor as yourself, it reminds us that just as we recognize that despite our faults, which we all have, we are decent people worthy of love, so too are others whose faults we see so clearly. We're very good at seeing everybody else's faults. It's a little trickier to acknowledge and work on our own. But and that's one of the teachings that Israel Salanter, who I mentioned, who began this Musar movement, what did he say? He said we have two eyes. One eye is to see the good in the others, and the other eye is for us to look within and see our own faults. He says most people use it the other way around. They look out to see other people's faults and their own magnanimity. He says it should be flipped the other way. We should look out others, always be looking out to see the goodness in others, and look within to see how we need to fix and repair ourselves. So loving our, but the idea here is that love your neighbor as yourself. We know that we're lovable. We all make mistakes. We all do wrong, but we are worthy of divine love, of the other people's love. We should recognize that about other people. Other people, for all their faults, are also worthy of love. All right, so let's move to some specific mitzvot. Always get listed in acts of loving kindness, this gimilut chasadim. So one of the big mitzvot is hospitality, hachnasat orchim. Lahachnis is to welcome or to bring somebody in, orchim are visitors. And many of these examples of proper behavior come from biblical stories. And let's see if I can pull it up. Oh, come on, where is it? Yeah, and then I just gotta share screen. Okay, there we go. So you should be, yeah, you can see the screen. Okay, so this is the story of Avraham. This is right after the part where he is circumcised, and he is sitting outside where he's living, and he sees three men coming towards him. Now we know, we're the reader, eventually we'll know that these are angelic beings, but he looks up and he sees three people coming towards him, and he immediately goes out to greet them, and he says, please don't leave, don't go past. You've come this far in the desert. Let a little water be brought for you, and I'll bathe your feet and recline under the tree, and I'll fetch a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves. Then go on, seeing that you've come your servant's way. And so they say, okay, great. Now notice though what he does for them. This is another lesson. Say little, do much. So he says, a little bit of water, a loaf of bread is a pat lechem. And then he runs to Sarah and he says, quick, 3 seahs of choice flour and knead and make cakes. Well, I forget exactly how much it is, but it's like pounds of flour. So it's a lot more than a little bit. And then he runs out to the herd and he takes a calf and gives it to the servant boy to obviously to slaughter it and to prepare it. This is always a curiosity. Then he has curds and milk. And wait a minute. I thought we're not allowed to eat milk and meat together. But you could, two possibilities. One, Abraham hasn't received the Torah yet. And so milk and meat wasn't a problem. Or, as our tradition tells us, of course, Abraham, all the patriarchs knew the Torah. God gave it to Moses, but they already had like an early copy of it, that they knew all these laws. How could you say that Abraham would eat milk and meat together? So one possibility is that he served them dairy first, waited a little bit, and then he served them their meat. Okay, so you can choose whichever one you want to hold or believe. And then he goes and he does all this preparation. This is the example of what hospitality is about. That first of all, he doesn't sit around. He doesn't sit around waiting for, do they really need something? Are these guys going to ask me for food? He initiates the contact. He greets them warmly and he initiates it. What's the needs? You focus on the needs of your guests. What do they need? They need food, obviously, water, of course, but he also says, let me wash your feet and you can recline under the tree because you've been walking out in the hot desert, and that's that's just wearying. So focus on the needs of your guests. Deliver more than you promised, as we mentioned, right? I'll get a little water and some bread, and then he ends up making this big sumptuous meal. And personally attend to your guests. Let's see, where's that verse? They ask about. Wait a minute, let's get to that. He stood. Well, somewhere it was. It was the line where he stood over them while they were eating. Here it is. He waited on them under the tree as they ate. Right? He acted almost as if he was the waiter. And that's again a sign of being a good host when you make sure that their needs are met and you attend to their needs. Um, and he does it personally. That's the other thing, right? He doesn't expect he asked the servant boy to prepare the calf, but when the food comes out, he's the one serving it. And finally is accompaniment. Notice that as they leave, and this is right, that there are three angelic beings. One has a job of uh, giving the prophecy that Sarah's going to have a child in a year. The other two are set off for Sodom and Gomorrah. It's been determined that, well, it hasn't been determined yet because now is the famous discussion between God and Abraham about what to do with Sodom and Gomorrah. But they're off. They're going off to Sodom and Gomorrah to do that job. So he walks with them to see them off, and that's also considered to be one of the most important um, elements of having guests is accompanying them, making sure that they're safe when they come in and safe when they go out. A couple other quotations about uh, guests and welcoming guests. One is not required to feed guests meat and wine. This is from the book a book called Sefer Hasidim, 12th century text. This is not the same Hasidim as we have today. This is a different group of people from Germany. But they had a book in the Sefer Hasidim, a lot of ethical teachings, and one is that you're not required to feed your guests meat and wine, but you are required to be hospitable. So whatever's available. And then there's a proverb on the same kind of thinking: better vegetables with love than fatted ox with hate. So we get to that. So that's another element of ethical behavior. It's not just about how much you can offer; it's how do you offer. Are you doing it with compassion, with respect, joyfulness when you have a guest, or really any mitzvah? Do you do it in that way or any mitzvah when you're helping people? Do you do it with joy? Do you do it with compassionate, with an interest in the needs of the other? Or is it just like, I got to do this, and so let me finish it as quick as possible? That's how we do it is just as important as how much. Um, Now, we should say there are responsibilities that Jewish tradition says about for the guest. The guests have certain responsibilities as well when they are being hosted. One should always be grateful, appreciate what's being done for you. One does not criticize the quality of fare when you're a guest in a home. Um, one is not supposed to take advantage. Um, just as the host is not obligated to offer meat and wine, the guest shouldn't expect that. So that's what it means to be a good guest. Okay, here's another one. Same passage about Abraham. We learn another special ethical mitzvah. This time it's God who's the active participant. It's Bikur Cholim. Bikur Cholim literally is visiting the sick. This is one of the key mitzvot, ethical mitzvot. Where do we get the idea of visiting the sick from this? Well, as I mentioned, the previous chapter describes Abraham's circumcision and the circumcision of all the people in his community, including his 13-year-old son Ishmael. And you can imagine you're 99 years old. I mean, it's a pretty serious. One thing, your 8-day-old baby, it's not such a big deal, but a 99-year-old guy, you're going to be very sore. So right after he's circumcised, and also we know that he's sitting out in the middle of the day when it's very warm, which according to some commentators, the heat was good for the healing of that part of the body. So, but notice it says here, the Lord appeared to him by the terebinths of Mamre. Now, what's interesting about this verse is that whenever it says Vayira Elav Adonai, God appeared to somebody, there's always a verbal communication afterwards. But there's no verbal communication here. It's just God appears to him. So what was God doing then? What was showing up? Well, obviously God was doing a mitzvah. And what was the mitzvah? He was visiting the sick. He was coming to give comfort to Abraham by just, being with him, just his presence. So this is the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, and this is a really important mitzvah. We can stop the share here. That's not what I wanted to do. Now, there are lots of lessons regarding visiting the sick. One thing, another I should have mentioned, the fact that God appears as part of an effort to do the mitzvah and teach the mitzvah of visiting the sick teaches us that therefore visiting the sick is comparable to the revelation of the divine presence. So that's a strong motivation. When we visit those who are ill, again, assuming that they appreciate the visit. I mean, sometimes that's actually one of the great things about visiting the ill, especially in the hospital. In the hospital, people are prodded and poked, and you have no control when you're in the hospital. You're sitting there at the mercy of nurses and doctors and their time schedule. Visitors are about the only people that the ill person has to control. So if the ill person says, I can't handle a visit right now, you say, okay, I'll come back, when it's good for you. So even allowing, if the sick person is able to say that, it gives them some agency, some control. But in any case, there's many, many stories about the importance of visiting the sick. The Talmud tells of Rabbi Chia, who was ill. He was in very great discomfort, and Rabbi Yochanan visited him. And we're told that all he did was hold his hand, and Rabbi Chia felt better. That's all that he needed. And Rabbi Yochanan was known to have great powers. He was one of these miracle rabbi guys. But what's fascinating is the Talmud follows up that story of Rabbi Yochanan visiting Rabbi Chia with a second story in which Rabbi Yochanan is sick. Now he's ill, and he's the one at home. Rabbi Hanina, a different rabbi, visits him. And it tells us it's almost the exact same story, just different players. Rabbi Hanina holds his hand, and Rabbi Yochanan is comforted. He feels better. The Talmud follows up this second story with a good question, that if Rabbi Yochanan is such a powerful healer, why did he need Rabbi Hanina to come help him? And the answer is a prisoner cannot free oneself. That is, even the doctor, even the healer, needs someone to help heal them. Nobody can do it by themselves. We all need the comfort of another's presence when we are ill. Wait, there was something else I wanted to say about, what's so interesting too about this is there's been studies done that about the importance of touch in the healing process. I mean, maybe you've all heard of like healing touch. I don't know how significant that is in the healing process, but they've done studies where, like, if a person puts their hand into a bucket of ice water and they'll count how many seconds the person can keep the hand in, and then they have the same person, they put the hand in the bucket of ice water, somebody holds their other hand, and the amount of time that they can bear the pain of the ice water is just much greater. So there is something about just being with another, presence, holding the hand, which is powerful in the healing process. Rabbi Moses ben Nachman, known as Nachmanides, he's a 13th century Spanish rabbi. He teaches that a visit to the sick includes three things. So when one makes a visit, there are at least three things to do when you show up. First of all, it's comfort. Each visit, he says, has the capacity to take away 1/60th of an illness. And the visit should make the patient feel cared about, and that eases the distress. That's why I say sometimes, um, as a rabbi, I know as a pastor, a lot of times I'm the only person that the sick person can say, I don't want to visit her, please. I'm not up to it. And they can kick me out of the room. And even though it seems like, well, you haven't really helped the person, you ask that they ask you to leave, but in some ways, even that is allowing them agency and some control. So the goal of visiting a person is always to make them feel cared about and ease their distress. Don't go to make a visit to make yourself feel better. It's about them. Number two, he says you should pray for the ill person. Um, and even something like refuah shlema, that's a common term when somebody's sick. Refuah means healing and shlema is complete. So to say refuah shlema is like saying, may you have a complete healing. So, when we say praying for the ill person, it doesn't mean like you have to open up a book and start saying extensive prayers, but even just, hope you feel better, refuah shlema, may you, be out of the hospital soon. That's all considered to be a prayer. We also, of course, in the synagogue, we have every week, we have what's known as the Misha Beirach. That's just the first couple of words of a prayer. It literally means may the one who blesses. It's just the first couple of words of that prayer. But in that prayer, and there are a lot of prayers that begin Misha Beirach, but the one that we usually refer to is a healing prayer. So it asks God to send healing to, and then we in our synagogue we have a list of people who have either have requested or someone has requested for them to say a healing prayer. And then finally, the third thing, according to Nachmanides, is to provide tangible assistance. And this is a really important thing that sometimes we forget to ask about. But does the patient need anything specific? Maybe they need medicine pickup. They can't get to the pharmacy. What about shopping? Do you need somebody to help with shopping? Do you need carpool for the kids? So that's the third thing, that if you can provide some kind of tangible assistance, a lot of times people will do a meal train, which is wonderful. Just to follow up with this, a couple of common sense rules for visiting. Always call ahead to make sure that when you visit, the patient is ready. Here in a case, either the hospital or usually here it's a case where the person's at home. Make sure that it's a good time to come visit. Let the patient direct the visit. Frequent short visits are preferable to a long visit. Are they in great discomfort? And sometimes maybe the conversation is hard, but just to, better, one 15-minute visit a week may be better than an hour-long visit once a month. If you can, it's preferable to sit and talk than to stand. That's at least, I don't know if that's, I can't remember if that's halacha or if that's just common sense. What you want to do is be in a position where you're not kind of standing over the person, especially if they're convalescing in bed. And be sensitive about the topics you speak about. Upbeat, optimistic conversation that helps remove the patient's anxiety is the best. So when I make visits, I usually lately, I don't know if all of you know Jill Ross. So Jill unfortunately suffered a terrible, they believe it's a stroke, and it's hard for her to communicate. So when I go, I almost always make sure I've got pictures of my grandson on the phone, because we're very close friends with Jill's family and with Jill, and she enjoys seeing the pictures or little videos of our grandson. So try to do things like that, show her that kind of stuff, which she enjoys. Obviously, one's not required. We're just getting out of COVID, so it's not required to visit individuals with contagious diseases, although maybe a phone call might help sometimes. And sometimes people who, Bikur Cholim doesn't necessarily mean a person has to be sick. Sometimes there are people who just can't get out of the house. And either if they're willing to accept a visitor, that's great. If not, a phone call is wonderful as well. Okay, so that's Bikur Cholim. So those were two specific types of mitzvot, of ethical mitzvot. I want to continue with three important virtues, and then we will take a little time to do some Hebrew. First one is gratitude. The term for gratitude in Hebrew is hakarat hatov. Tov is good. Hakara is recognition of the good. This is an attitude that needs to be cultivated. It requires awareness, and it's not just about me. An acknowledgement that the good in my life is not all about me. I didn't do it all on my own. It's not just good fortune smiling on me. It's the good in my life comes from the deeds of many others that impacted me. So this notion, again, here, it's not such necessarily ethical behavior, but it is how do we approach our behavior? And what are the underpinnings sometimes of ethical behavior? So gratitude is one of them. If we are grateful for what we have, hope that should inspire us to assist others. Gratitude requires remembrance of the kindnesses and assistance done by others for me. Be grateful for what you have, not miserable about what you don't. That's one of the teachings of, I think it was Ibn Givirol, who taught if you can't have what you want, at least want what you have. And gratitude is an act of reciprocity for an expression of grace. That's the basis really of gratitude, is to constantly be aware that we are so blessed with just life that we turn it around and we want to share it with others. We want to do good for others because we have been given things that we had no business getting. I didn't choose when I was born. I didn't choose the family that I was born into. I'm very grateful that I had a loving family. I know that not everybody has that. I'm grateful that the family I was born into was in the 20th. I was born into the 20th century in the United States of America during its the greatest years of American prosperity. That made a big difference in my life. I feel for the kids, especially my own, who are growing up in a different time in America, and things are very different. So that sense of gratitude for what I have inspires me to turn around and make sure that whatever I can do to assist others is important, because it wasn't all me that allowed me to have the nice house that I live in and the nice wife and all these things. There were a lot of different factors. Okay, so that's gratitude. Another very important virtue in Judaism is humility, anava. Moses Maimonides discusses in his great work, Mishnah Torah, which is his legal code, but he opens the legal code with discussion of more abstract concepts. And one of the first sections of the Mishnah Torah is about character traits. And he presents a process of moderation, that all qualities should be balanced. That, it's the golden, it's basically Maimonides' version of the golden rule, right? Stay in the middle course, moderation, not too much one direction, not too much the other direction. We're talking even in generosity. One should be generous, but not so generous that you give all your money away. And obviously, you shouldn't be a miser either. Go the middle course. There's only two exceptions to his rule of moderation: humility and anger. One should always suppress anger as much as possible, and there's no limit to one's humility. Humility is about not seeing ourselves as more important than others, including those who have achieved or have achieved less than we have, or have less than we have. And the great example if Abraham was the great example of hospitality, Moses is the great example of humility. Despite being the greatest prophet, he spoke to God face to face. Nobody else has ever done that according to our texts. Um, he was known for his humility. um, and humility requires also this ongoing awareness of God, for we're all equal before God in our relative insignificance. And since we're each created in divine image, each is comparable, though, in the respect that we owe each other. So all human beings are mortal, and all experience, and everyone experiences suffering. Nobody escapes. Therefore, there's no reason for us to lord it over anybody else. Think we're better than anybody else. We can learn a lot. And one of the great teachings in this ethical work known as Pirkei Avot, translated into English usually as Ethics of the Sages, is, who is wise? The one who learns from every person. Doesn't matter, it's not only the scholars, but it's from every person we can learn. So humility is another core virtue. And the last one we'll finish, because this is the season of repentance, is tshuva and tikkun. Tshuva is usually translated as repentance, although it has so many other meanings. Tshuva comes from a root which can mean to turn. It can mean to return from where you came, but it can also mean just to turn. And sometimes that's all we need to do, is turn the direction that we're going, which isn't helping us, and just turn to a different direction. Tshuva can also mean answer, and that's the days of awe, which are coming up in less than a month. These are days of response. We're supposed to respond to the divine call. So that's tshuva, but usually it translates as penitence or repentance. Tikkun, you've probably, this term has become widely known. Tikkun olam, everybody talks about it. I think President Obama used to talk about tikkun olam. Tikkun olam literally means repairing the world. It has a lot of meanings. It's been appropriated to mean basically social justice, which is it's fine. It's not exactly what it meant originally, but that is how people understand it today. But tikkun does mean repair, and repair is an element of the tshuva process. That's something that we work on during this month of Elul as we get into the high holidays, is what do we need to fix within ourselves? Tshuva and tikkun are among the most important concepts that Judaism offers. They teach us that we have the innate ability to correct our faults and also the weaknesses, the deficiency, not only in ourselves, but in the world around us. That we don't need an outside force to make good that which we spoil. We only need to change our own behaviors and change our direction. The reason why we don't need a figure like Jesus, in Christianity, one goes through, Jesus offers himself as a sacrifice through which others can go through and be atoned for. Judaism doesn't need that concept, although obviously we had that concept for generations. When there was a temple, we had this notion that you would offer up a sacrifice in place of oneself for the wrongs one did, at least inadvertently. And that's how you would gain atonement. You would purge the wrongs, the stain on your soul by making this offering. We don't have that opportunity anymore because the temple doesn't exist, which is probably a good thing, because the emphasis on this notion of tshuva, that we don't need an outside source, an object to use to help us atone for whatever wrongs we've done, whatever we need to repair. We don't need that. We have the ability within ourselves. We just need to change our behaviors, change our direction. So that's why tshuva and tikkun are essential. There's a famous midrash that says there were certain things that were created before the world. So things that were in existence before the world was created. And one of those is tshuva, because without tshuva, the world can't work. Tshuva speaks to our ability to achieve atonement for our mistakes and transgressions. Tikkun reflects our ability as individuals or as a community to repair the world. Um, that notion of tshuva existing before the world was created, even shows that there was a self-correcting mode already in the way the world was going to work before the world became operational. And these gates of repentance are always open. Sharei tshuva are always open anytime during the year, 24 hours a day, whenever we're ready to make that move. It's just that at this time of year, this is a focus because of the coming holidays of Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Tshuva informs us that no one is perfect, but no one is obliged to remain in a transgressive condition either. Rabbi Eliezer, one of these early rabbis, was asked, when's the best time to do tshuva? So he gave a great answer. He said, well, you don't have to do tshuva until the day before you die. So his student said to him, well, wait a minute, that's great advice, but how do I know when we're going to die? Oh, okay. So then you know what? You better be working and correcting yourselves every day. Because you never know. So therefore, if every day we're working on improving ourselves and fixing whatever we see, whatever tears we see in our own selves, then we're going to be okay. True repentance is a 3-stage process. 3 R's. Recognize the wrong done and apologize. Repair the damage done, which is correct the behavior, and then resolve not to do it again. So recognize, repair, and resolve. And those also all deal with time. Past, we recognize the wrongs done in the past. Repairing the damage, correcting our behavior is our present goal, task. And then resolving not to do it again. That's the future, which is, of course, the hardest one to follow. A statement in the Talmud says that tshuva is great because it transforms transgressions into virtues. How does that happen? Well, if one transforms the desires and the tools used in doing the wrong into tools and desire for doing good, then you've changed the transgression into a virtue. If you're a person who is very passionate, and that leads to anger and responding angrily to people and attacking people because they're so passionate about what they think is right or whatever. Well, if you can transform that passion into just doing good for others, take out the anger, take out the nasty responses, the nasty rebuttals, and transform that passion into care and concern, working for a good causes, putting hours and energy into that, well, you've taken that transgressive behavior and turned it into a virtue. Last thing is just to mention the term tikkun olam again. Today, it's a phrase to describe social justice work. In its origin, it meant literally repairing the world, which had been sullied by sinful behavior and created a rift with God. That is, the term tikkun olam literally means fixing the broken world, but not because we don't have universal health care, but rather because people are sinful, and when we're sinful, we cause this rift between ourselves and the divine. So tikkun olam originally meant doing things like mitzvot, all types of mitzvot. I mean, this is what motivates Lubavitchers to put those mitzvah tanks on the street. They don't have it in South Bend yet, but at least in New York, you may see a mitzvah tank where they're encouraging people to put on tefillin, light candles for Shabbat. Why is that so important? Because their theology teaches that the more mitzvot that Jewish people can do, the rift that our bad behaviors cause between ourselves and God, that can be healed. So that was the original notion. But today, this idea of fixing the world has been transformed into righting an imbalance in the world, economic, environmental, political. Um, so sometimes scholars get, I had a teacher, Byron Sherwin, who used to be so irritated with how the concept tikkun olam has been bastardized by, what he considered do-gooders. Um, but I thought that was a little unfair since that's great. It's a wonderful taking of this term and interpreting it into our world today. Um, since, a lot of us don't hold above its theology. So at least we've got this term and translate it literally into fixing, repairing the world by whatever the corrective behavior, writing that imbalance, whatever that is, whether it's universal health care, so everybody has health care, whether it's, I would argue allowing women their own agency and reproductive health, whether it's, ending nuclear armaments. These are all things we can do to make the world a better and safer place for everybody. Okay, so that is, there we go. See, I finished even before the hour is up. Let me take this down. Okay, so now I want to turn to something different. And we're going to try doing this. Those of you who would like to stay on for this, I've got at least the first one. I got to find the other lessons, but wait, what do I do with it? We're going to start this. Here it is. Okay, wait, I got to call it up. And I'll try to send these materials out so you can work on it at home. Okay. What you're seeing right now is we're going to move into, do a few minutes each week of Hebrew. And here's the Aleph Bet chart. There's a lot of different programs on how to learn how to read Hebrew. And really what we're looking to do is to decode Hebrew. So you can look in a prayer book and figure out how to read the words. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't even need necessarily to understand all these words, but at least to decode so you can follow along. It's just another symbolic language. But what I like about this approach is instead of giving you, well, here's Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, the ABCs of the Hebrew letters, they teach it by looking at what letters look like each other. And you can see here that there are a lot of letters. These are what you call block letters. There's also cursive writing in Hebrew, but most books are written in block print, and the newspapers are in block print. And you can see that a lot of the letters look like each other. They do a good job of giving us ways to mnemonic devices to remember these letters. So you have here's a line 2, you have the letter called Daled, which makes the D sound like a D. And here's a Resh, which makes the R sound like an R, like the letter R, R. But you can see they look pretty much like each other. So they give you a mnemonic. Well, the D has a dent in it. The R is totally rounded. But you can see, so just looking here, the letters all, I wanted to make it smaller. Well, okay, we'll just show you the letters here, and I can send this out. So these are just different letters and how they look like, and some by how they look. Here's a y, and here's a v, but they look very much, except one's tiny and one's a little bit longer. And here's a final letter that makes the n sound like an N, and it looks just like it, but it's even longer than the vav. So that's how they go. That's how they teach it by how the letters look. And in Hebrew, most of the vowels go underneath the letter. Some go on the same line. It's as opposed to English where all the letters on the same line. But these are consonants and these are vowels, and you just get practiced in in putting the consonants and the vowels together. What is easy in Hebrew compared to English is that while there are some letters, like 2 or 3 letters that may have the same exact sound, like there's 2 letters that make an S sound. There's two letters that make a V sound, like a V. So that's a little confusing because, but there, um, we don't have any PHs that make an F sound in Hebrew. So everything, the letter sounds like what it is. It doesn't change the sound. The consonant, I should say. The consonant doesn't change the sound. All right, let's go down here a little bit. And let's go through some of the first things. And you can do this at home. You can say it with me, or you can put on your mute and do it to yourself while we're going through it. But here's how that works. We just go through and sound out these vowels and consonants. Oh, and I should also mention some of the consonants, some of the vowels are silent, and we'll see why. That's important. So here we have vowel number one. It's just a straight line. There is a name for the vowel. It's called a batach, but the most important thing is it's a straight line, and it makes the ah sound. So you can sing along with me. Line one. Ah, 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 ah. And let's go down to line two. We'll pretend we're in the doctor's office. Ah, 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 ah. Okay, that's enough of that. Here's the first letter of the alphabet, actually. This is the letter Aleph. Aleph has no sound, which is important because sometimes you want the sound of a vowel and you don't want it connected to a consonantal sound. So it's important to have some consonants that do not make a sound. So here we go in line five. The vowel we just learned makes the ah sound. The aleph is silent. So it's as if we were up here on line one. Ah, 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 ah. Line six, same thing. Ah, 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 ah. All right, let's go to the next lesson here. Oh, we have a new vowel, which isn't so new because the way we pronounce it, they're going to distinguish between Sephardic and Ashkenazic. It's more accurate to say Israeli pronunciation and Ashkenazic. Yeah, Iris? You just have to unmute.
Thank you, Rabbi. I wanted to ask you whether there's any tone in Hebrew, because when you pronounce and I noticed that you have but the last one you pronounce as because in Chinese there are four tones for each character.
Yeah, it's not in Hebrew. If I change it, no, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But I know that in Chinese it's a little different how you pronounce the word. Here it's just no, there's no tonal difference. So here it says Sephardic and Ashkenazic. Again, it's really more appropriate as Israeli pronunciation, and in this case Ashkenazic, although there's a lot of different variations of Ashkenazic pronunciation, and some Sephardic pronunciation is also slightly different. But they distinguish it simply as Sephardic and Ashkenazic, because the major difference is, and this is the way they pronounce these vowels in Israel, is this little T vowel is, which also has its own name, kamatz, but it doesn't make a difference. It's just it looks like a T. It is pronounced ah, just like our vowel up here, the straight line. Now you'll say, well, why do you have two vowels that are pronounced this? You pronounce it the same. Well, there are some grammatical reasons. This is considered, in some cases, a long vowel, whereas the other one is a short vowel. It doesn't make any difference in pronunciation. There are, however, certain cases where the pronunciation does change, but we won't get to that for a long time. So for right now, all practical purposes, it's exactly as the vowel above. It's pronounced ah. In Ashkenazic Hebrew, it's pronounced aw or o, and that's why sometimes people are confused with, we say Shabbat Shalom, or in Ashkenazic, it's actually Yiddish, where people will say Guten Shabbos. So how is it Shabbat or is it Shabbos? And wait, but that doesn't give you a help with, wait, let me think of where a vowel, the vowel aw, Let's see. I can't believe I can't think of a difference. Um, all right, it'll come to me. But there are times when it sounds different with an Ashkenazic pronunciation. For our purposes, though, we're going to learn the Israeli pronunciations, and so it's just ah. So that line 1, again, this new vowel that we've learned, it looks like a T, is ah, 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 ah. And here in line 2, now we've got the aleph, which is silent with the ah vowel sound, which looks like a T. Ah, 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 ah. Let's go down to line 5. Here we have the first vowel we learned, straight line, and the second one, the T. They both sound exact same in this case. Ah, 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 ah. Let's do one more. Ah, 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 ah. Okay. So far not too exciting. It's all pretty much the same. All right, here we go. Our first sounded consonant. This is bet. Now, the bet is just to let you know, it's got bet as in ball because there's a dot in there, a little ball. If you take that dot out, it's going to sound different. We'll get to that one eventually. But it also has what was it? A bump, I think, because it looks like, let me just go up here, the letters again. It looks like, where is it? Oh, here it is. Oh, base extended. Okay. So it looks like another letter we'll get to eventually where it's just rounded around. But here, so it looks like it's got it, but this is a B. It's got the base, longer base, and it's got a dot in there because we're going to meet another version of this letter without the dot, which will sound differently. Okay, so we'll get to the B's now. B. All right, so it makes the B sound. So number 1, ba, 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 ba. Okay, it doesn't make a difference whether it's the straight line or the T vowel. It's always ba. Ba, 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 ba. And in line 3, we get a little bit of the two consonants we've learned so far. Ah, ba, ah, ba, ah, ba, ba. And line 4 is ba, ba, ah, ba, ba, ah, ba. And in line 5, we start to make some of our first words. Ah, ba. Notice that even though the aleph is there at the end, it makes no sound. So it's just ba. Ah, ba. Abba. That's father. Ah, ba. Ba. Here in line 6, ba, ba, abba, abba, ba, abba, ba, abba, ba, 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 abba, abba, ba. Abba, ba. Now the term ba is the vowel for coming. So Abba comes. Abba is coming. All right, there it is. All right, let's do a couple more of these. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad they brought the vet in here. So there are a number of letters that will take a dot in the middle, like we just saw with the bet. Only 3 of them in the Israeli pronunciation change the sound if there's a dot or not a dot. Any other time you see, and we'll get to these 3 letters, this is one of them. Any other time you see a dot in a letter, you just ignore it. It doesn't change the sound. There's only 3 that it changes the sound, and this is one of them. So if it has the ball in this letter with the base, it's B. But if there's no ball, it's a void. So void is V. Here's also another vowel, but this one's silent. What do you need a silent vowel for? Well, sometimes you need the consonant sound, and you don't want, you just want the consonant sound. You don't need a sound with it. However, I should say the silent vowel, just of necessity at this point, we're going to say there's two versions of it. It's silent if you just have the letter with the silent vowel, you have to pronounce something. You can't not say it's the. If it's, well, we'll get to that eventually. They'll give us some examples, I think. Okay, let's just go through this. It's almost as if there's no, in this case, there's almost as if there's no vowel underneath the word at this point. So this is one. So this is the V sound, and we're just going to make that sound. Even if it has the silent letter, it's still the sound of the letter. V, 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 V. And in line 2, we have the V, the consonant, but here with our other vowels we learned. Va, 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 va. And why don't we get on to number 4? So here we're back and forth between the B with the ball in it or the V with the void. Ba, va, ba, va, ba, va, ba. Again, the aleph at the end is the consonant. The silent consonant does not change the sounding. Let's go down a few more. Let's do 5. Ba, va, ba, va, ba, va, ba. And let's go down to 7. Abba, 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 ba. And the last one, a number that we'll do on this page is 8. Av, ba, av, ba, av, ba. And you can see it's almost as if, now they haven't put the silent vowel underneath the V here, but it's as if it were there. So that's when you would need, if in a longer word, like Avraham, you're going to need a silent vowel, so you just get that V sound without a vowel. All right, let's do one more. We'll learn another vowel, and then we'll pause for tonight. This is E. 2 versions of the E vowel, the dot by itself, or the dot followed by this letter here, which is also a consonant, not in this case. This case, it's joining the dot as a vowel. So they're both pronounced E. So here, line 1, E, right? The letter's silent, dot is E. Here, the second one is E. Aleph is silent, and here we have the vowel of the dot with the yud, but they're still the same vowel sound. B, V, they tricked us, they threw an in there. V, V. Okay, line 2, B, V, V, B, B, V, V. Let's go to line 3. Avi, Avi, Av, Aviv, Avi, V. Line 4. Av, Av, Avi, Av, Avi. Line 5, this word we've seen before. Abba, Avi, Ba, avi, ba, in line 6, ba, avi, av, avi. Line 7, ba, avi, av, avi. Line 8 is abba, avi, ba, avi. And line 9, abba, ba, av, ba, avi, ba. And last line, abba, ba, av, ba, avi, ba. And the term here, avi, is my father. So it's a possessive, that the E vowel sound at the end is a possessive in Hebrew for singular, first person singular. But anyway, that was okay. So we got, so just to review quickly, we learned 2 consonants, aleph and bet. Oh, 3 consonants actually, aleph, bet, and vet, b, v, depends on whether there's dot in there. And we learned 4 vowels, E or E, ah looks like a T, ah that looks like a straight line somewhere around here, line 4, ah. And then there's that silent vowel that we haven't made much use of yet, but we will eventually, the 2 dots on top of each other, horizontal. Okay, all right, very good. We'll keep working on this too each week, and hopefully that'll help people. And Caitlin, I can't see you, but I can see your name. Glad you're with us tonight. And we'll get a chance again. I can send you the other YouTube videos that we've had so you can catch up. Okay, all right, everybody, have a good evening.
You
we'll
as
see
well.
ya.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Rabbi. Good night.